Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I am joined by author Emma E. Murray to talk about the disturbing side of things with transgressive horror, with her novel Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day and her short story collection, The Drowning Machine and Other Obsessions. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to have you here and to talk about transgressive horror, which
Yeah,
is
my
fun.
favorite kind.
It is a lot of people's favorite kind. And we were talking about this earlier, but it seems like I think it was Sina Pelayo who said this when I had her on, that kind of during these stressful times, it's like people either want like a cozier, lower stakes horror, or they want bleak and challenging, like
Yes.
extreme transgressive stuff. Seems to be the the
People
fork
go
in the road.
extreme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one extreme or the other.
So what draws you to transgressive horror? Like, why do you like it?
So what I really like is how it delves into the taboo, which
Mhm.
is the whole point of transgressive horror, right? Is it's transgressive because it's breaking boundaries. And horror, I mean, really transgressive fiction and transgressive horror are really the same depending on your definition of
Yeah.
horror. But
I was gonna say, like, it's tough because horror is itself transgressive, so to be, like,
yeah, I
extra
feel
transgressive.
extra, yeah. But I mean, it really gets into those taboos, and I like how it gets into the dark psychology of humanity. I have a
Yeah.
background in psychology, and so I'm really interested in that, like what makes people do some of these things. And also, a lot of abnormal psychology fits into transgressive horror, since usually the characters they're either outcast or they're suffering with mental illness. Like, a lot of the times that is like a big part of transgressive horror, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah. So do you think that goes in line with the big rise in the unhinged women stories that we're seeing?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. The unhinged women and like feminine rage is like perfect. I love it. And a
Yeah.
lot of those are definitely transgressive. I
Yeah.
love that direction everything's going.
We mean, we'll talk about it. Um, but I mean, sorry, I forgot to ask you up top. Tell us about your books. Tell us about Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day.
So first of all, it's my favorite title, and it's so funny making people say it. Um, so that it is a very dark book. It's about a woman named Birdie who is dealing with the grief of losing her son, her young son, and she's also in a domestic violence relationship with her partner Russ. And so she's dealing with those horrors, those more domestic horrors. And at the same time, there is a serial killer in her community that is targeting women and doing home invasions, which is like honestly my biggest fear, which is why I really tapped into that for this novel. And there's also this body that is decomposing and has sentience and is basically trying to have people find her. And so those are kind of three storylines that converge in the novel.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's a crazy one.
It is wild. I'm interested because you said you had a background in psychology, and I'm assuming learning about like domestic abuse. Because I feel like as a writer, you had a lot of love and empathy for Birdie as a character. And I think anyone who's even known anyone who's gone through that knows that those relationships, that situation is so messy, and it is so hard to get people to leave their abuser. It is like one of the more difficult things. And I think the way you portrayed her, and like something you'll hear often in those situations is like you don't understand how he is during the good time. You did a good job of showing the good times, so you as a reader kind of understand like what it is that she's holding on to in this relationship, these like fleeting moments.
Well, thank you. Actually, so I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And so that means a lot to me that it comes across that way, because what I really wanted to show in this novel is that it's not so easy, like you said, like it's
Yeah.
more complicated. And also that what I don't like is not that I'm a villain or anything, but that people in fiction who are in domestic violence relationships, oftentimes there's like one bad guy and a good guy. You know, the victim is like completely good, and Birdie is not completely good. She's
Yeah.
definitely dealing with a lot of stuff and she's very complicated. But at the same time, she doesn't deserve to be treated like this. And
Yeah.
so I really wanted to get into, yeah, that complex psychology of that. I'm actually going
Yeah.
to be donating part of the proceeds to the domestic violence hotline, because I really want other women, or people, it could be anyone, to get out of
Yeah.
domestic violence relationships. And I also wanted to give back in a way because it does get into the nitty gritty of that and like
Yeah.
the terrible parts. So definitely trigger warning for people who have been in those relationships, but at the same time, maybe you'll find it cathartic, like I did, to really get into that.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there was layers, and like I said, the chapters coming from the body that's decomposing.
Those are like my favorite parts because I have like a weird obsession with decomposition. And so I got to use all of my research over the years. I've read like scholarly articles and stuff like, and so I hope that people will find it very accurate if you're in that kind of field. Like some forensic psychologist is going to be like,
Yeah.
"You know what? That makes sense." Like and I'm like, "Please don't think it's wrong. I tried really hard to make it realistic."
They're gonna start assigning your books as text.
That would be the coolest thing ever, and they will not.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a lot, but we were talking about it. It's dark. I guess I don't want to give too much away in like the direction that ending goes, but I feel like it's a journey that's worthwhile.
Thank you.
And so because I read that, I did not get to your short story collection and the Drowning Machine and Other Obsessions. So can you tell me a little bit about
So that one is also, it has some transgressive horror in it as well.
them?
So they're both appropriate for this
Yeah.
episode. But so like it's got my chapbook Exquisite Hunger, which is out of print, is now in there, and that
Okay.
that has a sapphic cannibalism storyline that is definitely different from the other ones I've read that are in the same vein. So it's got that. It's got a story, Mother of Machines, which is about a teenage girl that falls in love with an industrial lathe.
Oh,
And
very
yeah, so
interested.
it's got some really weird ones, but it's also got a lot of grief horror and
Yeah.
parental horror because I wrote a lot of the stories whenever I was either pregnant or a new mom with really bad postpartum depression. And so there's a lot of, it's actually dedicated to my daughter, the whole collection, because there's a
Oh.
lot of love for that. But it's a fun collection in a way. It's sad, but it follows like person's life in a way. It kind of goes from like children with their mothers and then to childhood and a little bit more into teenagehood and then into adulthood and some of the things that we face with horrors there. And then there's even a couple stories about old age and the horrors of like regret.
Yeah.
And there's a story about dementia that was inspired by my own grandmother going through dementia. And I think that the stories handle some really, really heavy stuff, but hopefully in a tender way, which is what I have been hearing from reviewers. So I appreciate that it came across that way. So definitely both really dark and like heavy books,
Yeah.
but they are both tried to be treated with like gentleness. So it
Yeah.
shouldn't feel like excessive.
You're not gonna feel like you've been beat up at the end of it.
I mean, maybe a little bit.
Maybe. Okay, that sounds really good. I remember people posting about Exquisite Hunger when it came out, so I am very excited that now I will get a chance to read
Yeah.
it. And also, Cannibalism Girlies will be all on that.
I love cannibalism girlies. Like the fact that that is like becoming a genre is my favorite thing.
Well, should we talk about some movies that
Yeah.
are in this transgressive vein? I was telling you earlier, I watched Martyrs for this episode.
And I said, I'm sorry.
It was one of those movies that had such a reputation, and I was like, I don't know if I will ever watch that movie. But I did. I watched it, and surprisingly, I it's tough to say enjoyed. I would
Yeah.
say looking at this list of movies, enjoy, I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
word I'm using, but I rated it highly.
I think that it has kind of a bad reputation, actually. People make it
Really?
sound like, yeah, people make it sound so, I mean, not to say it's not extreme,
Yeah.
but I feel like people think it's going to be this like crazy gore fest, and it's
Yeah.
really much more psychologically damaging than it is just gory. There's definitely some gore, not to mislead any listeners. like,
Mhm.
but I think that, oh, the ending, I know we're not going to give it away, but that is what makes the whole movie worth it. Like,
It is. I was talking about it with my it's a movie you watch and you go out with your friends after to talk about, because my husband and I talked for like 20 minutes and it's like, okay, well, if like this is what it means, then there's this. But then if this, then why did she say this? Why would
yes.
she say, you know?
And it makes you think back on the whole movie and,
Yeah.
like, put all the pieces together. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that you wanna talk to people afterwards. Like, I
Yeah.
immediately called a bunch of people who I knew had seen it, and I was like, "We have to talk about this."
It was just funny because I was watching it and you get introduced to these characters and then it cuts to a family, like a normal French family having breakfast, they're joking with each other and you spend like 15 minutes with this family, like really getting to know them. And I'm looking at the names, I'm like, I don't think any of these people have been characters that have been introduced yet. Like I'm really confused because it's like 15 years later and I'm trying to find the connection. And then bam, like one of our characters comes back and just giant shotgun like murders this whole family.
That part is so shocking, right? I think it's
Yes.
so well done too. It feels very real. Like,
It is, and it's also this very it's not this like John Wick style like trained assassin. Like yeah,
yeah,
she kills the dad. But she really struggles with the two kids and
yeah.
it's really like how much did you know about what they did to me?
I know. And then yeah. Oh, and then as everything comes together though later, you're kind of like, "Oh, okay, I get it
Yeah.
more." Yeah.
It's a lot. But I was just like, "Oh my gosh." Because that's the
Yeah.
first kind of big act of violence you see in the film.
True.
Because
And it is
there's
like
things
so
mentioned,
long.
but I think it's the first one you like literally see.
Oh, yeah, and there's such a lead up, like you said, like you're just watching them have breakfast for so long.
Yeah, and
And so you're
everyone's
attached to them a little
joking. Yeah,
bit.
like the
Yeah.
mom's working outside, they're talking to the son about what he's gonna do, and yeah, it's just ugh. I do also see Excision on here. I can't remember if you put that on here or if I did.
I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, so
Okay. It
could
was
be either
probably
way,
it.
but I love Excision. I think so funny, but then it gets so dark. Like,
It is so dark.
I cry every time at the end. Like, and I just,
Ugh.
oh my God, those actors are incredible. Like, it's crazy how the movie can make such like a 180 from being such just a dark comedy to being
Mhm.
something that just tore my heart out. And
Yes.
and such a great example of transgressive horror because she is a real outsider dealing
Mhm.
with like how come I don't fit into society, dealing with some mental illness, like, oh, that movie gets me. It really is just that both those movies, those endings are just heartbreaking.
That ending had me staring at a wall because I think I just watched it on Tubi on a whim, no
Oh,
idea
yeah.
what it
I
was
watched it
about.
on a whim too, and then I watched it again immediately after because I was like, "What? Oh my god." And it immediately became one of my favorite movies.
I like it. I guess along that line, also May, I think, falls into that, if you've seen that.
Yeah, May to me feels almost like a lighter version
It
almost of
is.
Excision. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking about this, I don't remember which episode, but it was like weird girl movies. And I'm like, if you're going like up, like I would say, yeah, Excision is dark and like May is like a little more approachable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, May is also dark,
Yeah.
but it feels so much lighter in a lot of ways. Like her
Yeah.
as a character is lighter, the ending, although dark, is lighter.
Yeah. It's like the implications of it are dark, but yeah, I think tonally the movie isn't like as focused on making you a part of that as
Yeah.
much, I guess, as a viewer, but
I still felt so bad for May though. She didn't
Aw.
deserve that. Like, she seems like such a sweet person.
She is her little doll. She just wants a friend.
I know her little doll. So creepy.
And also, she just wanted someone to match her freak, you know? And she
For
was
real,
dating.
that guy, how dare he be so mad that she bit him? Like,
Well, I
he's
know.
obviously weird too. Like,
Well, that's the thing. He thinks he's weird. And,
yeah,
he was like, "Oh, I love gross things. Like, the grosser the better. Tell me. I'm going to show you my
yeah.
student film that's like this zombie movie." And so May is like,
Yeah.
"Okay. I'm
He's
weird
such
too." And
he's
then
such
he
an
immediately
audience
was like,
insert, like, because we think we're so weird, and then it's
"Yeah."
like, what would we be like? I mean, it's like kind of makes you feel like, oh my god, am I just an edge lord? Like,
Let's see here. Looks like we also have Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, which again, not an enjoyable film.
also one of my favorite movies.
I mean, it's a great performance.
It is amazing. I feel like there is not a movie that really gets into feeling like I understand how a killer thinks, and the story of like Henry Lee Lucas as much as Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Like, oh my god, and the ending of that one too also shocked me like beyond belief because it really shows you like a psychopath, and how that's just how they are and they're unchangeable. Like because
Yeah.
that's how their brain is actually functions, like they can't it's not like they're just trying to not have emotions, they just don't, I love that it doesn't show the murders too, that it shows
Yeah.
the aftermath. I actually think that's so much more disturbing. Like, it only shows that one murder where it's like they're watching it on a VHS that they recorded of it. And that also that weird distance from it in both of those ways, like in it being the aftermath or a videotape, gives it this like, I don't know, it makes it way more disturbing somehow.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've watched it, but it's Michael Rooker, right? Is the
Yeah. Yeah.
I just remember he did such a great job in that. And if
Incredible. Yeah.
people who only know him from like Guardians of the Galaxy, a little bit of a different role.
I mean, he's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to pull that off, like, I mean, all the actors in that movie, like the main three, like Henry and Otis and Becky, are just amazing because you feel like it's real. Like it definitely doesn't feel like a fantasy in any way. Like you feel like you're watching almost like a documentary or something, which makes it so much scarier.
Yeah, it does have this very like matter of fact style.
Yeah, and I think that that's what's great about it in a way is that it doesn't glamorize it at all, which a lot of serial killer movies feel like they weirdly glamorize murder. And this is like, no, it's really gross. Like you don't want like any of the characters really. And you definitely don't want to be like them in any way. And it's
Hmm.
exploring like why are they like this? It really gets into a little bit like their background and why do like how do they build up to this and
Yeah.
oh, it's a freaky one, but man, I've seen it way too many times.
Did you like Videodrome?
I love Videodrome.
Okay.
I love Videodrome so much. I'm a huge Cronenberg fan,
Yeah.
and Videodrome was one of the first ones I saw. And the very first time I saw it, I was just like, I do not understand what the hell happened in this movie at all. Now I've seen it more times than I understand better, and I think it's actually great transgressive horror too because it really gets at why are we into this intense violence and sex with violence and what does that mean, what are the repercussions,
Yeah.
like the different ways like some people are puritanical and want to ruin it and some people are like weirdly into it like
Ooh. Yeah, I loved how absolutely weird it was. Like
so
when
crazy.
it gets weird, you're like, what is happening?
I mean it gets weird pretty fast.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, in Cronenberg fashion.
he's just so brilliant. Like I think Videodrome is like honestly one of his best. Although I love it'd be hard to put them in some kind of ranking order, but like I love that. That one's one of the ones I've seen the most.
Okay. You have Antichrist on here, which I will admit I have not seen.
It is a rough watch.
That's what I have heard.
I you see, I'm like a big Lars von Trier fan, and
Mhm.
I do not recommend his movies to just anyone. Like I feel like they are all rough watches, to be honest. Antichrist, well, first of all, William Defoe in it is like just amazing. Like, and
Yeah.
it's probably his most like evilish feeling character, even though he's not supposed to be just evil. I don't know. Like you have to watch it, but like it it definitely has one of the most like cringy scenes I've ever seen, in the way that like I was like, oh my god, I can take a lot of gore, but there is a self mutilation scene that is pretty much like, as a woman, imagine the worst thing you could do to yourself. And yeah, like, and so it is very intense, but I think it's really brilliant. It gets into grief and guilt
Yeah.
and how those things are intertwined, and it gets a lot into like men and women's roles and what they think they're supposed to do in relationships and as parents. And it gets into a lot of like cool witchy stuff. Like you just did that
Interesting.
witch yeah, that witch podcast, and I love that, but like it's a very different kind of witchiness. Like,
Okay.
I mean, I don't
I
know. I
didn't
don't
know
want to make
that.
you watch something else that you're gonna hate.
Yeah, I will say, like, what I know about it is that it is like a couple going to a lake house after the death of their son, and that is
Yeah.
literally, like, what I know about it, and I know it's a rough watch.
Yeah, like he's a psychologist, and so
Mhm.
he's like, "I'll be your grief therapist," basically, which is like, "What?"
Unethical.
Like, I know, right? Like, and also it's his son too, so
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a whole thing. But he's like, "I'll help you." And so she has gone out here before to write her dissertation, which is about like witches, and she starts to kind of spiral, and so does he, like, as they're dealing with this grief. And like, honestly, there's this hatred towards each other that is going to build because of
Yeah.
the circumstances of what happened. And I don't know, I really love it, but I can see why a lot of people would not like it. That's gonna
That's
be
gonna
true
be
on
the
like
theme that's gonna be the theme
everything.
for the
Yeah,
episode.
exactly.
Listen,
Like,
some people are gonna love this. Some people are gonna hear the premise and say, "No, thank you."
I mean, I think it's really, really worth watching. So, I mean, there's that one scene that you might want to like close your eyes. Like,
Alright, noted. Should we talk about some books?
yeah.
Okay. I can start us off with Tell Me I'm Worthless by Allison Rumfit. Have you read this one?
Yes, I
Oh,
loved it.
I do too. I have to read Brainwyrms, which I have heard
I haven't read
really
Brainwyrms
yeah,
either.
I've
Yeah.
heard really good stuff about it. I've heard it's really gross, which again intrigues me.
It sounds awesome. Yeah.
I mean, with a title like Brainwyrms,
I mean, yeah, exactly. It's
I
gotta
guess
be
like
good.
what was I expecting? In this book, 3 years ago, Alice spent a night in an abandoned house with her friends, Isla and Hannah. And since then, her life has spiraled. She lives this very haunted existence, selling videos of herself for money, going to parties she hates, and drinking herself to sleep. And memories of that night torment her. But Isla asks her to return to the house to go past the keep out sign. And Alice knows that she has to go. And
Okay.
together they face the horrors of what happened there and try to rescue Hannah, who the house has chosen to make its own. This was a dark book, but I appreciated, I don't know if that's the right word, maybe, how messy the characters were,
Yes.
how morally gray, and I mean, like, touching on taboo subjects
Oh, yeah.
that I don't think you would normally do for, like, protagonists of a book.
Oh, yeah, like, how the first half, you're basically not sure, like, they're both accusing the other one of sexually
Yeah.
assaulting them, and it's like that. Wow, and the way it gets into, yeah, their characterization, like, why is this one girl a TERF? Like,
Yes, like it
and it's just really interesting. Like, I was
mhm.
blown away by how well-rounded these characters were, because they felt so real. But also, you're right, like, they were still sympathetic,
Yeah.
and even whenever they're kind of, yeah, like, icky in a lot of ways. Like, I wouldn't have thought that, like, a turfy main character, I would feel for her, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this book was a whole journey. It, um, takes place in the UK, so kind of that political landscape, which I mean, we're in the US, have no room to talk. We're going through
Yeah.
our own issues. But,
People need to
uh,
read this book right now, honestly. Like,
yeah. But I just mean, yes, if you want like a dark, challenging book, but that's also so masterfully done. And I think with all these things, like a lot of these movies are art house films. A lot of
Yes.
these movies are done by like very well respected and lauded directors. And I feel like there is something about challenging the darkness and doing it like with beauty. Like a lot of these books have beautiful prose, and there is just something about like marrying the beautiful with the disgusting.
I think that's exactly what like transgressive versus like splatterpunk or extreme is. Splatterpunk is more political, and extreme can be like gory for gory's sake, which can be fun in its own way. But like that transgressiveness is like finding like it's going into that nasty darkness, but for a reason. Like you
Yeah.
come out with understanding. And oh my god, and Tell Me I'm Worthless, the house's point of view was one of my favorite things. Like I did not expect that, and
Yeah.
it really added such a cool layer. And I'm not usually a huge haunted house person, but I loved this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a normal haunted house story at all. I mean, dealing with
No.
yeah, weird haunted house, but like haunted people. And yeah. And I know we talk a lot about like queer representation. And I think that has to include making room for like imperfect and often vile protagonists, or like
Yes.
protagonists that have done vile things.
Exactly, and that's what I love that. I love that that is becoming a new thing because it's yeah, like queer people exist in every way.
Yeah.
Like so you can't only have them be like the innocent good guys. Like sometimes they're not, and it's just that's part of representation, to be
Yes.
honest.
It really is.
And yeah, like the trans representation in that is so interesting and so well done and I the ending on that one too. I'm not going to give it away, but like
Oh yeah.
oh my god. My heart.
It's just like, what am I supposed to do with this?
I know.
You can't do this to me, Allison.
I know. I really cried. Like, I was like, "No!" I don't know why I didn't realize this was gonna happen.
Yeah. I also love the cover for this. The one with like the face that has like the title over the eyes. I just
Yes.
feel like, to me, as someone who doesn't delve into this genre too often, the reputation it has for me is that it's kind of like the punk rock of the horror genre. And I felt like that cover really brought that energy.
I can totally see that.
So I am putting that in the freezer. Most of these books are probably going to be freezer
Yeah.
books. They are not the most approachable. Like, I wouldn't suggest picking these for a book club with like your grandmother, you
Oh my
know?
god, no. No. But yeah, I would say it's probably a freezer book. Like,
Yeah, I think it pushes you to it pushes you to the point where you're distraught at the end
yes.
after emotionally putting you the ringer in like every other way.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it, exactly. I was definitely distraught at the end.
So that is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Allison Rumfit.
Not really a horror book, but the most transgressive book I have ever read, and my most like put it in the freezer, not even my freezer, put it in somebody else's freezer, so I never have to see it again, was Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. And so it is horrific, although not a horror book. It's actually darkly funny a lot of the time, which you would not think it could be as funny as it is. But it's also truly the most disturbing book I have ever read. And so it is a first person account of a teacher who she becomes a junior high teacher so that she can seduce her students. And she is a psychopath. And is a really, really accurate representation of like antisocial personality disorder. Like it's really,
Really?
yeah, it's scary how well written it is, and I'm just, like, super impressed by it, but it was a book that I almost DNF'd multiple times because how it just doesn't turn away at all. But it also felt weirdly, like, I don't know, like, important in a way. Like, I'm like, I feel like I understand these people in a way, and I also would never read it again. Like
This book has been recommended to me.
Oh my god. I actually don't recommend it to anyone. If you are looking for like if you can read that description or hear that description and be like, "Okay, I'm ready for the most disturbing book ever," pretty much, then yeah, I mean, give it a go. I mean, it was well written. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. It's like it's actually beautifully written at times. It's also I read like everything and like watch like the most craziest stuff and I'm like, "No. This is never again." I felt dirty after reading it.
It seems like she did her job, though.
Yeah, no, it's super impressive. Like
It's
I know
effective.
I know why people recommend it because it is really effective. It is like and I mean and it's a really interesting look at someone who has that terrible inclination. Like, it's kind of like
Yeah.
but like I mean, I don't know, it's not like Lolita where you're like at least it kind of turns away and like that's an interesting look at
Yeah.
pedophilia because like he makes you on his side sometimes, but this is like you don't feel like you're on her side. It's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
I was like the whole time like, "Oh, I don't hate this lady."
Yeah. Have you read My Dark Vanessa?
I have not yet, but everyone tells me that is like a really really good like book to read afterwards actually that they
Yeah.
go well together.
They do, yeah, because it's the victim's point of view, but she spends so much of the book in denial where she's like, "No, I
Mm.
wanted it to. I seduced him, actually." And
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
so it's like emotional. You're on the emotional journey with her.
Okay, I do need to read that, like,
Yeah.
ASAP. Yeah.
I mean, you spend like a lot of time frustrated with her. You're like, "Girl, get
But
real."
that feels
No, yeah.
easier
I mean,
because
like
you're
that's what it
reading
was.
the
Yeah, like
victim.
just like your book where you're like, "Girl, get real. Get out
Oh
of
my
there.
god,
What are you doing?" Your friend is screaming at you to get out of this relationship, you know?
yeah. Oof, yeah.
Yeah.
I kinda love those kinda characters that you're just,
Yeah.
like, frustrated with.
And that is true to life. People are frustrating and sometimes they lie to themselves about things or they stay in relationships or situations where they shouldn't. It's human nature, as
Yeah.
frustrating as it is.
Yep. Oh, it is I mean, it is a freezer book, like, it is, like put it honestly, like, in, like, some industrial freezer in some old motel or something where I'm never gonna see it again, like, it is oof, like and that means a lot coming from me because I would
Yeah.
not put most books in the freezer.
So that is saying something.
Yeah, definitely the most disturbing book I've ever read.
A
Like,
plus cover design too.
oh my god, right? I love that it has to be censored some places. I'm like, it is a buttonhole. Like, it doesn't have to be censored. I mean, it looks very similar, but it is still actually a buttonhole. I can't believe that cover made it like to
Yeah.
the
I
final
don't know.
product.
It
Like,
is
it's
it
brilliant.
is brilliant. It is like the Now You're One of Us by Asa Nonami, which has like the bar of soap and it's
Yes.
definitely like pubes on it.
Yes.
And you're like, how did this get through? I don't know, but that's brilliant.
I love it whenever that stuff does get through them.
Okay.
And I mean, if you can't handle that cover, then you cannot handle
Yeah.
Tampa. So it is a great warning. Like,
All right. Moving on to At Dark, I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca. Have you picked this one up?
yes, I got to read
Yeah.
an arc, and so I read it a few months ago, and I loved it. Oh my god,
Uh,
I'm a big fan of his.
yes. Like there's such a big voice in transgressive horror. Like I remember I read um what is the
Things have gotten worse since we
yeah,
last spoke.
that's it. I was like staring off into
I mean, it
space.
is a long
Yes.
one.
Yeah. Is it was these long titles. They're great, but
I love those crazy
when you're
long
trying to
titles.
remember what they're called, it's like yes. Yeah, so I've been here since things have gotten worse since we last spoke. And
Me
I
too.
have
I picked
just
that one up with
loved
the cover.
every yes. I have just loved everything. And um yeah, just the marriage of the beautiful writing with just an embrace of this darkness in humanity.
Oh
So
yeah.
in this book, you are following Ashley Lutton, who is online and offers services to people who are despairing individuals who are like thinking of ending their life. And he kind of provides them with a service to kind of give them hope, kind of like shake them out of this, kind of give them he calls it like a rebirth, like an
Yeah.
experience. Um
I love
and
that whole idea.
yeah, where he essentially meets them, he, has a contract, he lays out like exactly what's going to happen, and he provides like care afterwards, and
Mhm.
asks them like how they're doing. But at the same time that he's doing this, he is grieving. He lost his wife and his son went missing, so there's also just like this lack of closure on his end, and also like the circumstances around his son running away or going missing, have him like have to confront things about himself.
Oh, yeah.
And he starts chatting with someone who wants this service, and it just becomes this like toxic relationship. But also we get like a bonus Eric LaRocca
Yes,
story in there,
there's
which
like
I
a
thought was
story
fun.
inside, yeah.
Like he starts talking to this guy who just tells him like an Eric LaRocca story, and I'm like, perfect. I love we get like a
I
two for
love that
one.
part.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just such a great marriage, like I said, of like this like darkness and bleakness and this catharsis.
I think it's like my favorite of
Really.
LaRocca's books so far. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I am a super fan like you. Like I read like everything and loved everything. And I was really blown away by this. Like the whole idea of it. And yeah, like nobody does toxic relationships like them. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So that, yeah, I would say is a freezer book. What do I have on here? I had a quote. Only through pain can we find healing, and only through death can we find new life.
yes, it's definitely a freezer book, especially for most readers. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, oh, that beautiful prose with the most disturbing ideas. Like, I love
Hmm.
that. That is 100% my thing.
Yeah. I feel like great for fans of like Clive Barker and Poppy Z. Bright,
Yes. Yes, very Clive Barkery. I love that. And I'm also a huge Clive Barker fan.
So that is At Dark, I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca.
Well, my next one is Crash by J.G. Ballard. And it is everything by J.G. Ballard is transgressive. So if you have read anything by him, then you will kind of know the vibe. So it is about basically erotic car crashes. And so it is about this kind of techno fetishism about
Interesting.
people. Yeah, people who so basically like there's this car crash and you end up finding out about this like group of people who's super obsessed with car crashes and get off on it. And they're also really obsessed with like specific car crashes, like celebrity car crashes, like James Dean and stuff. And so it's just it's really it's got that weird like blend of technology and sexuality and being an outsider and kind of pushing things farther and farther, which is like what a lot of fetishes do. And there is a movie and it is also amazing.
I was gonna
So
say, I'm like, this sounds familiar. I just have a movie adaptation.
yeah, and it's a Cronenberg movie, so
Oh, interesting.
which totally, I mean, Ballard and Cronenberg are just like, yes, they're the same. Like, and so it is. I mean, I don't want to give away too much about it, but yeah, it erotic car crashes. Like, if you can imagine people who have a fetish for that, that is like the that's kind of the transgressive part of this.
All right. I am intrigued.
I mean, I think you could handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's probably in the freezer for most people. I'm like, I think it's probably like in the fridge for me, but like probably for most people, definitely a freezer book. Like
Yeah.
just because of how strange a lot of it is and like grotesque.
Yeah. Perfect. I am adding that to my TBR because I am intrigued. Um, my final official pick is Maeve Fly by CJ Leede. 2 years ago, I think when StokerCon was in Pittsburgh, there was a panel, and CJ and Eric were on the panel, and it was like extreme horror and like eroticism, like the marriage of like
That's so cool. I wish I had been there.
oh, that the room was packed. People, I think they really underestimated like the interest in this because it was a stacked panel. It was like Rath James White, Brian Keene, Eric LaRocca, CJ Leede, Haley Piper
Oh
on a
my
panel,
god,
right? And
I have
so
so
it's
much
this like
FOMO.
tiny, it was in this like tiny little conference room. And yeah, people were sitting on the floor, people were standing, people were in the hallway.
I mean, yeah, like, I think, yeah, people underestimate how much people like this kind of horror.
Yeah.
Like,
But it was, yeah, about like the marriage of this like grotesque like body horror with erotic elements. And that is on display in Maeve Fly. I think like people say, yeah, it is very much like an American Psycho, like esque retelling, in that
mm,
she also loves Patrick Bateman. Like Maeve, the character, like during the day is a Disney princess, like an ice princess. I wonder if she just like couldn't say like
yeah,
who it
probably
was.
didn't wanna get sued by Disney.
um,
Yeah.
but like you know who she is.
Yeah.
And but at night she's kind of spends her time in dive bars reading like Bret Easton Ellis and stuff, and like really getting into these like misanthropic literary protagonists. And she meets her best friend's brother, her like coworker's brother, Gideon, who like awakens this darkness in her. And like as their relationship like gets more intimate, like the stakes get higher, and like the things that they're into and like stuff, it just becomes this like really gross, messy, violent thing. And then she
I
kind of
mean,
goes off
yeah.
on her own. I mean, for anyone who's read it, I mean, there's like eggs, and that's all I need to say.
I mean, I love that. That's in that whole genre of those, like, messy, feminine rage kinda character.
Yeah, and she's wild, and you're in her POV. Um, and I mean, yeah, I love those things. Like Boy Parts by Eliza Clark is another one that I absolutely loved, and the protagonist of that is very into transgressive cinema, and she's
Yes.
constantly like lecturing people on like, here's why like the 120 Days of Sodom is actually a masterpiece, and we're gonna watch it right now.
Oh my god,
Everyone's like, I don't want to watch that
yeah.
right now, actually.
When I read that one, I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta kinda stop recommending movies like this because this is how I come across," and I felt all
You're like,
bad.
oh no, it's me.
That's also a very American Psycho, but
Mhm.
female
Yeah,
perspective, like, which I think is really interesting. I like that. Like, I
yeah.
mean, for so long, American Psycho was this, like, I don't know, macho male kind of thing. A lot of guys still kind of emulate him, and I'm like, ew.
Like, I don't think you got it.
Like, I know, like, but you see that on like TikTok and stuff. Like, people are like, "Oh, I want to be like him." Ugh.
A Certain Hunger by Chelsea D. Summers is also a favorite of mine. I absolutely loved it. She's this food critic, and she just starts taking revenge on men and eating
Yes,
them. I'm like, perfect. No notes.
the cannibalism. Yes,
The
always.
cannibalism of it all, but also I love what people hate. They're like, this character is pretentious. I'm like, yes, she's a pretentious food critic. So that is the voice she is writing in. That is how she is coming
Yeah.
across. Correct. Like that is part
I
of
mean,
it.
I love unlikable
Yes,
protagonists. Like, I'm all about that. Like, give me
I
that
do.
morally gray, that unlikable. Like, as long as they feel real,
Yeah.
then yeah, I mean, a lot of people are unlikable.
Yeah.
Like,
Guess what? Like a person who is self-righteous enough to do this and then like talk about it in this way, probably not a great person. Okay.
yeah.
Like Geek Love by Katherine Dunn, also a
I have not
favorite of
read
mine.
that one. It's been on my TBR for way too long. I know I
I
need to read
know.
it.
You
Like,
need
I've
to
had
read
it
it.
recommended so many times.
It's so good.
And I know the premise and it sounds amazing. So I need to finally open it up.
Yeah, I think you do. And then you need to tell me what you think, because that is like one of my all-time
Really?
favorites. Mhm.
Okay. I will definitely read it soon. I have to get through a couple more books that are on my list,
Yeah.
like, that are, like, immediate reads, and then I'll get to it.
Trust me, I know how that goes. But I did not rate Maeve Fly, which, yeah, I'm saying is a freezer book. Like, you don't recommend this to your I always say your grandma, like that book club you have with your grandma. Like, I would say this is not a pick
Oh
for
my
that.
I can't imagine recommending, like, any horror to my grandma.
It's funny when I talk to my friend Quincy, because he's always like, my mom loved this. I told my mom to read this book and she loved it. And I'm like, your mom is cool.
Oh, that's so fun. I know, I love that. My dad reads, like, all of my stuff, but then afterwards, he's always like, "I did not really like this." He's like, "It was well written, but I don't really like the content." And I'm like, "Well, you don't have to read it."
Is he ever like, are you okay?
Well, yeah, a little bit. Like, I think he's like, "Yeah, like, this isn't based on how you feel, right?" I'm like, "No, it's fiction." He's like, "Okay, as long as it's fiction."
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, that is Mayfly by CJ Leede with a few extras.
My final recommendation is The Devil Thinks I'm Pretty by Charlene Elsby. And oh my God, I love this book so much. So it's like this young woman, and she lives in a trailer park and works at this diner in the trailer park, and she thinks that she has the devil in her, and she kind of starts down this dark path. And first of all, it's some of the most realistic, like, at one point I lived in a trailer park, and I've like gone to these kind of diners, and I was just like, damn, this is so real. Like, you feel it, you can like smell it. Like, it felt very real, and I love that. But it's also like, oh, it's so dark, and it's definitely, if you like those kind of darker feminine vibes, like, this is that. Like, and the ending is very shocking. Definitely a freezer book. Like, I actually was really surprised at the end. Even though it is ramping up, you just, yeah, like, warning, it ramps up way more than you even think it's going to. So,
Oh boy.
it's also, like, just beautifully written. I love Elsby. She also wrote this, collection, Red Flags, that I read recently, and the first few stories in that are, like, literally some of the best short stories I've ever read.
Wow.
So, definitely recommend that. I think she is brilliant. So,
I read Violent Faculties by
yes,
her,
yeah.
and that was a dark.
Yes, she's definitely very dark. Like,
I've definitely mentioned it on the podcast, but when I picked it up from the table, the person was like, how do you do with like violence and gore?"
what a premise, right? Like, so original. I love it.
Yeah, I
And
did.
that
Like,
cover too. That cover is so good.
I guess I should have known what I was getting into when, yeah, the cover is like a diagram of someone getting their tongue cut out.
Right? Yeah, it does give you a warning, just like Tampa. It's like some of these covers are like, "Can you handle this?"
I mean, even, yeah, like Now You're One of Us. That is like a
Yeah.
lot of taboos, a lot of stuff going on there. And I'm like, yeah, I guess a bar soap with peeps on it should give you a little bit of an idea.
I mean, that's what covers should be, right?
Yeah.
They should, like, it should be telling you what it actually is. I hate it whenever a cover doesn't give you any idea of what it's like. Like, sometimes there's like covers that look kind of like, I don't know, cozy almost for horror, and then you start reading it and you're like, "Whoa, this is way darker than I thought it was going to be." You know?
All right, that is transgressive horror. I'm sure someone is yelling at us for not mentioning Chuck Palahniuk, but that's fine. I don't care.
I mean, I love him too. I don't think that, honestly, okay, he is very dark and transgressive, but I don't think it's quite at the same level as some of these. And I'm sure people are going to hate me for that, but
That's fine.
people are so shocked by Guts, and I'm like, Guts is a great story. I love it, but it's, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of, it's more gross. It almost just feels like gross to be gross versus a
Mm.
lot of these books have depth. Not to hate on Guts, but like
when I started doing book reviews, I started on YouTube, and one of the first reviews I did was for Is It Beautiful Monsters? Is that his?
Yeah, yeah, I love
Okay,
Beautiful Monsters.
which I loved, and it was a good review. But I read like the remixed version or something, so I got like the date wrong that the book was published, and I had some man in my comments like correcting me and being an asshole. And
What?
since that day, 10 years ago, I have never picked up another Chuck Palahniuk book.
Oh,
So
well,
I am
that
sorry to Chuck
I
Palahniuk,
feel
but it
bad,
put
like,
a
that's
it
not
put a
his
bad
fault.
taste. I know it's not his fault, but I was like, just left it left such a bad taste in my mouth that I was like, I associate you with like, ew.
Yeah, he does seem to have some kind of toxic fans, like, for sure. I mean, he's a great writer. I actually
Yeah.
love a lot of his books. Like,
Hmm.
I just feel like, I don't know, they're kind of more humorous than a lot of these books, so I feel like they don't necessarily fit, you know?
Yeah.
But they some of them have a lot of depth. I was just saying guts particularly. Doesn't feel like that feels like that's the shocker to just shock people, like
Yeah. One tradition that we have on the show is to talk chilling obsessions. So, what is something you have been enjoying in horror lately?
so I'm gonna lighten things up like a million percent. Because I recently moved like over the summer. I moved up to the Northeast and I was putting all my books back because obviously I had to redo everything because my bookshelves, it's a great opportunity to redo everything. And I found my Goosebump book that had always just kind of been on this random shelf. And I started rereading them and they're so fun. I totally forgot how much I loved Goosebumps. I actually really, really love the choose your own ending ones. Like I have
Yes, those are
several of those.
so fun.
Some of the endings are just great. And so that's been my big thing is kind of like this nostalgic children's horror. And I honestly I can't wait for my daughter to be old enough
Yeah.
to read them because I'm glad I kept so many of them. That she hopefully she will like them. Watch her be like, no, I don't like horror at all. Like that's her rebellion.
I know. I've bought a few and my son has like no interest in them either. I know. He's
They're so
10.
good.
And I'm like, I was obsessed with these when I was your age. I would like count the days to go to the school library so I could get
Yeah.
another Goosebumps book.
Or like a book fair, and they would
Yeah.
have like new ones. Ah.
Oh, with like the holographic
Oh, yes!
covers.
I have a bunch of those just because they're holographic. I'm, like, looking at some of them, like, I bought this one just because of the cover. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the best, but it had a cool cover. But they actually hold up really well. I mean, they're obviously children's horror, so it's not gonna be the same vein as everything else. But I was surprised how good they are. I was like,
Yeah.
R.L. Stine, actually a really good writer. Like,
Yeah. Knew what he was doing. I love that. So, Goosebumps resurgence.
yeah, I think everybody should pick up an old Goosebumps book. Just
Yeah.
in these weird, crazy, terrible
You
times,
know what? Yeah, when
they're
you're
really fun.
done with your transgressive, you can go to your cozy cozy
Yeah,
reads.
exactly. Goosebumps is pretty cozy.
They are.
Like, you definitely I mean, it's got parts that are scary to kids, but as an adult, you will definitely be like, this is just fun.
Yeah.
Like, oh, crazy, like, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or like, this like weird carnival or whatever.
The second tradition that we have on this show is to ask our guests for a final girl song.
Yes, so I really agonized over it, and it's also a weirdly light choice for me. So I picked, I Think We're Alone Now from by Tiffany, which is, like, this great, like, 80s hit,
Yeah.
like and I really love whenever there've been a few horror movies that I've seen that have just ended on, like, a really weird poppy song for the credits, and I feel like this would be great for a horror movie where it's like, I won, and then it's like they play this song, and then at the very end, it's like a teaser to like a sequel because it's like, oh, we're alone, because then like
Yeah.
the monster guy or slasher or whatever guy pops out, and I think it would be really fun, and I would definitely want to be in the sequel too. So
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun way to end end a
Uh,
movie.
that would be really fun.
And it's a great song.
It
I actually
is.
unironically love that song.
Yeah, and it's full of poppy glory. Because I know when they did the My Best Friend's Exorcism movie on Amazon Prime, they had like, you know how they do like a slowed down like version. They
Yeah.
had for I Think We're Alone Now for the trailer. But I think just having like the
Oh,
original like poppy, like
yeah.
bam, smash cuts credits.
Right? I like it whenever they do that weird, like, jarring smash cut to
Yeah.
credits with, like, a really poppy song. Like and also there's a really creepy documentary about that song and, like, these people who were obsessed, who had, like, erotomania, where they were, like, in love with Tiffany and thought that she was in love with them, and
Hmm.
it is a very creepy documentary called I Think We're Alone Now. And it's
Interesting.
actually and okay, it's creepy, it's also really sad because these people are
Yeah.
definitely, like, really struggling, but, like, I feel like it actually looks at them with a lot of sympathy,
Yeah.
but it's also, like, you're also like, "Wow, I hope that Tiffany has some good security."
Yeah. Ooh.
So I
I'm
recommend
gonna
that
have to check that
documentary
out.
too.
I'm like adding that to the list. That sounds really interesting.
And it's not too dark, like
Yeah,
yeah, I think Tiffany's still alive.
I think so.
Yeah.
Um,
I think she still tours, actually.
are you serious?
Yeah, I feel like she does. I
Does
feel
she
like
go
I
to
saw something
malls?
about that. Oh my she should.
I know.
Like,
Go
I
back to
would
her
honestly
roots.
go. Like,
Yeah.
if Tiffany had a concert nearby, I would go. It would be fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today and talking transgressive horror.
Thank you for having me and for reading and watching a bunch of very upsetting things.
You know what? It's fun to have that to do sometimes. Like I said, I ended up like Martyrs was a movie that I had held on this like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever be okay enough to watch that. And I finally watched it and I was like, I think I like it, actually.
See, and now you'll be that person like
Now I'm
me
gonna
and
do
like everyone that watches it that's like, "Hey, have you seen Martyrs? You should really watch it," and forces people to watch it.
Oh no, I've become the protagonist of Boy Parts.
Oh no!
That's how it happens. But you have two books coming out, and I think your short story collection is coming out kind of around the time this episode will be out, I
Yeah.
think.
Yes, it is coming out February 21st, from Undertaker Books, and so definitely pick that up, and Shoot Me in the Face on a Beautiful Day doesn't come out until August 26th, but pre-orders are supposed to open, I think, in May, but you
Ooh,
can
okay.
add it on Goodreads now so you don't forget.
Woo! All right. Well, you heard it here. And where can people follow you online?
So I have all my socials, I think, linked on my website, which is emmaemurray.com. And just in case they're not linked, I think my Blue Sky, I'm not sure if that one's on there. That's Emma E. Murray at bluesky.social. And on Instagram, I'm Emma E. Murray _ because there was already an Emma E. Murray. So that underscore is there.
You got to find her and get rid of her now.
No, she's allowed to exist.
There can only be one.
Oh my gosh.
God. I've been watching too many of these. I'm just kidding. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with me.
Thank you.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok at Books in the Freezer, or you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes will be at booksinthefreezer.com, where you will find a list of all the books mentioned. I am in the process of trying to transition from Amazon affiliate links to bookshop.org affiliate links. So you should notice that change with this episode and moving forward. I think except for maybe indie titles that I cannot find on bookshop.org. So it'll be a case by case basis, but a change going forward. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a few ways to do that. One of them is to become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/booksinthefreezer, or to use the affiliate links that you can find in the show notes. Another free way to show your support for the podcast is to leave a review on a site like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And a huge thank you to those of you who have taken the time to do that. I have been your host, Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.